They tell you it's a joke. The new conscripts, the rear echelon clerks, the civilians who've never held one. They laugh and call it a flashlight because they think it's weak because they've heard stories of the beam bouncing off orc hide, of bolts shattering against tyrannid carapace of heretics walking through volleys that should have cut them apart. They think we call it that because it's pathetic, because the Imperium gave us toys to fight nightmares. They're wrong. I'm going to tell you the real reason, and after I do, you'll understand why I can't sleep in the dark anymore. Why none of us can. I've carried a Lasgun for 23 years. That's not an achievement. That's a statistical anomaly. The average life expectancy for an Imperial Guardsman in active combat is 15 hours. I've survived through 47 major engagements, countless skirmishes, and 3 different planetary campaigns. My regiment started with 3,000 men on Caitha IV. When we shipped out, there were 41 of us left. Most of those 41 are dead now, too. I'm writing this in a recovery ward on some nameless orbital station waiting for my discharge papers. And I need you to understand something before I explain the nickname. The Lasgun didn't save me. It did something else entirely. The first time I fired one, I was 18 standard years old, fresh off the transport from my hive world, still thinking war was glorious. Training Sergeant Vec was a massive brute with augment arms and a face like cured leather. He lined us up on the firing range, a windswept plateau of rust-colored stone, and distributed the weapons. Mine was old even then. The power pack scarred, the barrel discolored from thousands of discharges. It was heavier than I expected. The plastilla grip worn smooth by countless hands before mine. Most of those hands were probably dead. This Vec growled, holding his own Lasgun across his chest. It's the only thing standing between you and everything in this galaxy that wants to eat you, burn you, or tear you apart for sport. It's not the best weapon. It's not the strongest. But it's yours, and you will learn to love it, or you will die. He paused, his augmetic eye worry as it focused on us. Now fire at the targets. Hold it tight and don't close your eyes. I should have listened to that last part. The firing stud depressed beneath my finger with a soft click, and the world turned white. I'm not talking about the flash from the muzzle, though that was brilliant. A coherent beam of energy that seemed to burn the air itself. I'm talking about what it did to my vision. The afterimage seared itself across my retinas, a blazing line of pure light that persisted. Even when I blinked, I could still see it, ghostly and shimmering, overlaid on top of everything else. The target at 50 meters, a crude dummy of a greenskin, had a smoking hole through its center. But I couldn't fully appreciate my marksmanship because that line of light was still there, drawn across my field of view like someone had scratched it into the lens of my eye. You blinked, didn't you? Vec was standing behind me, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. They all do. First time your eyes just got their first kiss from the Emperor's light. Get used to it, conscript. You're going to be seeing those lines for the rest of your life. He was right. Though I didn't understand what he meant then. I thought the afterimage would fade in a few minutes, like when you stare at a light and look away. It did fade, but never completely. There was always a ghost of it, a thin thread of brightness that lingered at the edge of my vision. And every time I fired the weapon again, another line was added. By the end of that first day on the range, my vision was crossed with dozens of them, a web of light that never quite disappeared. The other recruits experienced the same thing. We compared notes that night in the barracks, squinting at each other in the dim red glow of the lumen strips. A boy named Callus from one of the lower hive levels. He didn't make it off Caitha, for said it felt like his eyes had been branded. That was closer to the truth than any of us knew. Our first deployment was to a jungle world called Verdes Prime, where heretic forces had taken control of the primary manufactorum. The regiment dropped into a green hell of vegetation, so thick you couldn't see 5 meters in any direction, where the humidity was so intense that your uniform was permanently soaked, where things rustled and screamed in the canopy above. We learned very quickly that the Lasgun's real advantage wasn't its power. It was that it never jammed. Stub rifles clogged with mud. Auto guns seized up from moisture. But the Lasgun just kept firing. Point and shoot. Point and shoot, watching the jungle light up with each discharge. That's when I started to notice something strange about the veteran troopers. Sergeant Karim had been with the regiment for 8 years, which made him practically ancient in Guard terms. He was a lean man with dark skin and darker eyes, or at least they should have been dark. When he looked at you, his pupils seemed to glow faintly, like there was a light source behind them. It wasn't much, just a subtle luminescence that you only noticed in shadow. He never used the lumen packs that we new conscripts relied on when moving through the jungle at night. He didn't need them. I asked him about it once during a night watch. We were dug into a forward position, listening to the sounds of the jungle trying to kill us. He was sitting completely still, his lasgun across his knees, staring into the darkness with those faintly glowing eyes. "Sergeant, how can you see without a light?" He didn't look at me. "I have light, trooper. More than I need. I don't understand. You will." He finally turned to face me, and in the complete darkness of the jungle night, I could definitely see his pupils glowing. Every time you fire your weapon, you're storing light. Your eyes are recording it, burning it into the tissue. After a few years, after a few thousand shots, you don't need external sources anymore. The light is already inside you. I thought he was joking, or maybe speaking metaphorically. I was wrong on both counts. The campaign on Verdes Prime lasted 11 months. We fought through that emperor-forsaken jungle meter by meter against cultists, who had abandoned their humanity for the promises of the ruinous powers. They were better armed than us autoguns with proper scopes, solid shot weapons that could punch through cover. But we had numbers, and we had the Lasgun's reliability. More importantly, we learned to use the flash itself as a weapon. In the darkness of the jungle, when the canopy blocked out even the light of the system's stars, a Lasgun discharge was as good as a flare. Fire once, and you'd illuminate everything within 10 meters for a fraction of a second, long enough to see where the enemy was to adjust your aim. Fire again and again, and the jungle would strobe with light, each flash freezing the action like still images in a picked feed. The heretics couldn't adapt to it. Their eyes, human eyes, couldn't process the rapid transitions from absolute darkness to brilliant light and back again. They stumbled. They fired wild. They exposed themselves. We learned to fire in patterns. One trooper would discharge to illuminate. The rest would aim and fire at what the flash revealed. Then another would discharge to illuminate. And we'd adjust and fire again. It was like watching an ancient film where the images flicker and jump. Except this film was full of people dying. My squad became very good at it. Callus, before he died, could fire his Lasgun at an angle that would bounce the flash off the wet leaves and illuminate areas around corners. Trooper Min, also dead, figured out that rapid fire would create a sustained strobe effect that could completely disorient enemies who charged our position, but the cost was accumulating in our eyes. By the 3rd month, I couldn't see normally anymore. Even in broad daylight, my vision was overlaid with a web of light trails. After images from thousands of lost charges, vertical lines, horizontal lines, diagonal slashes, they crossed my field of view in a complex pattern like someone had drawn a map on my corneas with luminous ink. I learned to see through them, to focus past them, but they were always there. At night, they were actually brighter, more visible against the darkness. I would lie in my bunk and trace the patterns with my eyes closed, counting how many lines I could distinguish. It became a game, a way to fall asleep. I was up to 312 distinct lines before I stopped counting. Sergeant Kareem's eyes grew brighter. In complete darkness, they cast enough light to read by a faint, sickly luminescence that made his face look corpse-like. He could navigate the jungle at night without any equipment, following paths that were invisible to the rest of us. The heretics started calling him the Ghost Light in their vox chatter, which we intercepted. They were terrified of him. They thought he was some kind of demon. He was just a man who had fired a Lasgun too many times. The burns started appearing around month 7. I noticed them first on Trooper Vivian, a stocky woman from an agri world who had been with the regiment for 4 years. She had taken off her jacket in the stifling heat, and I saw the patterns on her arms. They looked like lightning scars, branching patterns of lighter tissue that ran from her shoulders down to her wrists. They followed the major blood vessels. I've realized arteries and veins traced in scar tissue. As if something had been burning through her circulatory system from the inside. "Don't stare," she said, catching my gaze. "You'll have them too soon enough." "What are they?" "The price?" She pulled her jacket back on. "Every time you fire, a little bit of that energy goes into you instead of out the barrel. It's not much, but it adds up. Your body tries to dissipate it, to bleed it off through your blood. After a few years," she shrugged. "This is what you get. Pretty, isn't it?" I checked my own arms that night. There were faint lines beginning to show, barely visible except in bright light. Thin traceries of lighter skin following my veins. I touched them and they were warm, warmer than the surrounding tissue. Over the following months, they grew more prominent. By the time we shipped off Virdi's Prime, my arms looked like they'd been decorated with elaborate branching tattoos. Except these were burns from the inside out. The pattern appeared on all the veterans. Sergeant Karim's scars were so extensive they covered his entire torso, wrapping around his ribs like the roots of a tree. Some of the patterns were beautiful in a terrible way. Complex fractals of burned tissue that caught the light and seemed to glow faintly. We learned to wear long sleeves and high collars to hide them. Not out of shame, but because the new recruits would ask questions we didn't want to answer. Because by then, we were beginning to understand. The Lasgun wasn't just a weapon we used. It was changing us physically and fundamentally. The light was getting inside us, burning itself into our tissue, our nerves, our very cells. And the more we fought, the more we fired, the more we changed. Cave 4 was where everything became clear. It was an ice world, perpetually dark, caught in the shadow of a massive gas giant that blocked out the system's sun for most of its orbit. The enemy was a genocidal cult that had hollowed out the planet's primary hive city, turning it into a breeding ground for alien horrors. When we deployed into that frozen darkness, we realized immediately that this was going to be different. This was a war fought entirely in the dark, in tunnels and corridors where no natural light ever penetrated. The flashlight nickname took on a new meaning there. Because in that absolute darkness, the Lasgun was the only light source we had. Every shot illuminated the tunnel around us for an instant, freezing the cultists and their genocidal masters in snapshots of horror. Fire, see, aim. Fire, again. The darkness between shots was complete and total. A blackness so profound that it felt physical, like you could touch it. We learned to navigate by the afterimages in our eyes, using the ghost trails from previous shots to remember where walls and doorways were. Sergeant Kareem didn't need to fire anymore. His eyes had grown so bright that they cast visible light in that absolute darkness. He could walk through the tunnels with his Lasgun slung, his eyes shine illuminating the path ahead in a sickly glow. The cultists saw him coming, a figure wreathed in dim light like a corpse candle walking, and they fled. The genocidals didn't flee. They attacked, and Kareem killed them with single shots. his light-burned eyes tracking their movements in the darkness with inhuman precision. I realized something in those tunnels, something that made my blood run cold. Even as I fired my weapon over and over, adding more light trails to my vision, more burned scars to my arms. The Lasgun wasn't poorly designed. It was perfectly designed for exactly what it did. Not just killing the enemy, but marking the user, changing them. The Adeptus Mechanicus had created a weapon that would physically transform its wielders over time, burning light into them, making them into something that could fight in any darkness. We found a section of the hive that had been converted into a shrine to the alien gods. The walls were covered in blasphemous symbols. And in the center was a clutch of genocidal eggs, leathery sacs pulsing with alien life. We should have called in an orbital strike, sealed the section, and moved on. But Sergeant Kareem walked into that chamber, and his eyes flared so bright they cast actual shadows. The light from his pupils was almost painful to look at, harsh and clinical. And in that light, I saw the eggs begin to crack and wither, the unborn creatures inside them writhing and dying. "Do you understand now?" Kareem asked, not looking at me. He was staring at the eggs, his eyelight burning into them. We're not just soldiers. We're becoming something else. The weapon is transforming us into living weapons ourselves. I wanted to deny it to say he was wrong, but I couldn't because I could feel it happening to me, too. The afterimages in my vision were no longer just passive recordings. They were beginning to burn when I concentrated on them to pulse with faint luminescence. The scars on my arms were warm to the touch, radiating heat like there was a fire beneath my skin. I had fired my Lasgun so many thousands of times that the light had soaked into me, had become part of my biology. We cleared that section of hive in 18 days. By the end, half of my squad could navigate without external lights, following the glow from their own eyes. The new recruits looked at us with a mixture of fear and awe. They called us the Bright Guard in whispers, as if we were something holy or cursed. Maybe we were both. The burns grew worse. The pattern spread from my arms to my chest, my legs, my neck. I could trace the major arteries and veins just by looking at the scars. A complete map of my circulatory system rendered in burned tissue. At night, in total darkness, I could see them glow faintly, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. The light was literally in my blood now, being pumped through my body with every beat of my heart. Some men broke under the transformation. Trooper Callus was one of them. He started seeing the light trails even when he closed his eyes, even when he slept. He would scream in the night, clawing at his face, saying the light was burning through his skull. We found him one morning with his eyes open, staring at nothing. Pupils blown wide and glowing so bright you could read by their light. He was still alive, technically still breathing. But everything that had been Callus was gone, burned away by the accumulated light inside him. We sent him to the rear with the other burnouts, the men whose transformation had gone too far, who had become nothing but vessels for the light we had poured into ourselves. The Departmental Munitorum doesn't talk about them. They're listed as casualties, combat losses, because in a sense, they are. They lost the war inside themselves, the battle between their humanity and the weapon they carried. But I saw the transport ships that collected them, saw them loaded into the holds in neat rows, still alive, still glowing. I don't know where they were taken. I don't want to know. Caith 4 ended with an orbital bombardment that turned the remaining hive sections into molten slag. We evacuated to the transports and watched from orbit as lance strikes hammered the ice world, burning away the alien infestation and probably a few million remaining civilians. It's called exterminatus light in the Guard, not severe enough to warrant destroying the planet, but enough to sterilize several thousand km. We left 41 men aboard those transports. We had started with 3,000. During the journey to our next deployment, I spent time in the observation decks, staring out at the void. In the absolute darkness of space, my reflection in the plastilla showed someone I barely recognized. My eyes had developed their own glow, faint but unmistakable. The burn scars covered most of my exposed skin. Complex patterns that seemed almost deliberate, like circuit patterns on a logic engine. I looked like a diagram, a technical schematic of a human being rendered in scar tissue and trapped light. Sergeant Kareem found me there one night. His glow was strong enough now that he cast a visible aura, a soft luminescence that pushed back the darkness around him. He looked less human and more like an idea of a human, a figure sketched in light. "You're wondering why?" he said. It wasn't a question. "I know why," I replied. "The Mechanicus designed it this way, to make us into whatever we're becoming." "No," he shook his head. "That's what I thought too at first. But I've been doing this for 8 years, and I've seen the schematics, read the technical manuals. The Lasgun wasn't designed by the Mechanicus. It's an STC design, a standard template construct from before the Age of Strife. Nobody alive knows how it really works. Not completely. The tech priests just manufacture them according to the pattern. Then why does it do this to us?" He turned to look at me, his eyes blazing. "Because that's what it was designed to do back when humanity actually understood what they were building. Think about it. What's the most common condition in guard combat? Darkness, underground hives, tunnel systems, starship corridors, night fighting, void combat. We fight in the dark more than in the light. So they created a weapon that would turn its users into living light sources. Slowly over time, through extended use, the more you fight, the better adapted you become to fighting in the dark. It's not a bug. It's a feature." I understood then the nickname, the real meaning of it. We called it a flashlight, not because it was weak, but because that's literally what it was turning us into. Human flashlights. Living light sources that could operate in any darkness. The weapon was a conversion device, a tool for transforming standard humans into something more suitable for the endless wars we fought. "What happens at the end?" I asked. "When the transformation is complete." Kareem was silent for a long moment. "I don't know. Maybe we burn out, like Callus. Maybe we become something else entirely. I've heard stories about guard regiments from hundreds of years ago. Whole companies of men who glowed so bright they didn't need any light at all, who could fight in absolute darkness and see clearly. The Departamento Munitorum calls them myths. But I've seen the reports buried in the archives. I think they're still out there, still fighting, so transformed by their weapons that they're not really human anymore." That conversation haunted me through our next deployment and the one after that and all the ones that followed. I watched the transformation continue in myself and my remaining squad members. The burns spread further. The glow grew stronger. The afterimages in my vision became so bright and persistent that I stopped being able to see normal darkness at all. Everything was overlaid with light. Ghost images of every shot I'd ever taken, burning through my perception like a permanent overlay. On Garrisundus, fighting the orcs in their underground warren, I realized I could see perfectly in complete darkness. Not with my eyes. They were too corrupted by light trails to be useful, but with the burn patterns on my body. The scars were acting like photoreceptors, sensing the faintest traces of heat and light, and feeding that information directly to my nervous system. I could navigate by touch and burn sense, my entire body becoming an organ of perception. The orcs were terrified of us by then. They called us the Shine Boys in their broken language, and they would flee from our squad when they saw us coming, glowing in the darkness like vengeful spirits. It should have been satisfying, but it wasn't, because I knew what we were becoming. And I knew it wasn't something that could be reversed. Trooper Min was the next to break. She started laughing one day during a firefight, standing in the open and firing her Lasgun over and over, watching the flashes. She said she could see the light connecting everything, that every shot was adding to a great web of illumination that spanned the galaxy. We pulled her back behind cover, but she wouldn't stop laughing. Her eyes were glowing so bright they cast shadows, and the burn patterns on her skin were writhing, shifting like they were alive. They had to sedate her and send her to the rear with the other burnouts. I understood her madness, though. I could feel it pulling at me, too. The urge to just fire and fire until all the darkness was burned away, until I was nothing but light. The weapon wanted to be used. It sang to me, a constant pressure at the back of my mind, urging me to pull the trigger just once more, to add another trail to my vision, another burn to my skin. It was addiction and transformation and purpose, all rolled into one overwhelming drive. Sergeant Karim helped me resist it. He had learned to control the urge, to fire only when necessary, to meter out his transformation. But he paid a price for that control. The light inside him had nowhere to go, so it just built up, growing brighter and brighter. By the time we deployed to Rust, a forge world in rebellion, his eyes were so luminous that he had to wear dark goggles during the day. At night, he took them off, and his eye light could illuminate an entire room. He looked like a saint in the old paintings, wreathed in holy radiance. But there was nothing holy about what was happening to him. He was burning up from inside, the accumulated light of 10,000 shots consuming him. Rust was a nightmare of its own kind. The Forge world had fallen to a rogue tech priest who believed the Omnissiah spoke directly to him, commanding him to remake humanity in a more perfect form. His creations were waiting for us, half-human abominations fused with machinery. Their bodies rebuilt according to insane specifications. We fought them through the factorums and smelting pits, the air so hot it hurt to breathe, filled with the smell of molten metal and burning promethium. The heat did something to the burns. They opened up, weeping luminous fluid that glowed in the darkness. I looked down at my arms during a lull in the fighting and saw light leaking from the scar tissue. Actual light dripping onto the metal floor and leaving phosphorescent traces. It didn't hurt. If anything, it felt like relief, like pressure being released. The other veterans were experiencing the same thing. We were literally leaking light, our bodies unable to contain what we had stored in them. The rogue tech priest's servitors captured Karim during an ambush. We found him 3 days later in one of the deep research chambers, strapped to an examination table, and I wish we hadn't. The tech priest had been studying him, trying to understand his transformation. Karim's chest had been opened, not surgically, but carefully, and I could see his organs glowing through the ribcage. His heart was burning like a miniature sun, pulsing with brilliant light. His lungs filled with luminescence with each breath. Every organ, every tissue, every cell was saturated with accumulated energy from years of Lasgun fire. "Kill me," he whispered when he saw us. His voice was barely audible over the hum of the machinery. "Please, it burns. It's burning me from inside. Wanted to. The Emperor knows I wanted to end his suffering, but the tech priest's notes were there, scattered around the table, and I made the mistake of reading them. They explained everything. The Lasgun was designed to do this. The transformation was intentional, engineered into the weapon at the quantum level. Every shot fired would infuse the user with trace amounts of energy that their body would absorb and store. Over time, over thousands of shots, that energy would accumulate and change them, converting them into living batteries of light. But there was more. The notes theorized that the transformation had a purpose beyond just night fighting adaptation. The energy stored in a fully transformed soldier could be released deliberately and catastrophically. The tech priest had been trying to prove it when we interrupted him. He had been trying to make Karim detonate. We didn't kill Karim. We couldn't because as we stood there debating what to do, his body reached critical mass. The light inside him had built up beyond what his flesh could contain. He simply burned, not with fire, but with pure, radiant energy. For 3 seconds, he shone brighter than the forge furnaces. Bright enough to leave permanent afterimages in our eyes. Bright enough to burn shadows into the walls. Then he was gone, converted entirely to light and heat, leaving nothing behind but a vaguely human-shaped scorch mark on the examination table. The tech priest's notes explain that, too. In extremis, a transformed soldier becomes a weapon themselves, a suicide bomb of light and heat, capable of clearing a room or collapsing a tunnel, the ultimate expendable weapon. A man who has been turned into ammunition through years of faithful service. We are not just soldiers carrying flashlights. We are the flashlights burning ourselves out to illuminate the darkness for the Imperium. I burned those notes. I burned the entire laboratory. But I couldn't burn the knowledge out of my mind. The regiment, what was left of it, was pulled off rust and sent to a garrison world for rest and retraining. That's departmental munitorum code for we're replacing your casualties and sending you back out. I was promoted to sergeant, given a new squad of fresh recruits to train. I looked at their clean skin, their clear eyes, their new Lasguns, and I wanted to warn them. I wanted to tell them what they were getting into, what they would become. But I didn't, because the Imperium needs soldiers, and soldiers need weapons. And the Lasgun does exactly what it was designed to do. It kills the enemy, and it transforms the user. And in the Emperor's calculus, both outcomes serve the greater purpose. Who am I to argue with 10,000 years of military doctrine? I trained them the way Sergeant Vec trained me. I taught them to embrace the flash, to use the afterimages, to fire until the darkness was full of light trails. I watched their eyes change, saw the first faint lines of scars appear on their arms. Some of them asked me about my burns, about the glow in my eyes. I told them it was the mark of experience, the badge of survival. I didn't tell them it was the mark of transformation, the sign that they were being converted into something other than human. My discharge came after my eyes stopped working entirely. Not because they were damaged, they were too changed. The light trails had multiplied until they were all I could see. A blazing network of lines that obliterated normal vision, but I could still see after a fashion. The burn patterns on my skin had become sophisticated enough to act as full sensory organs. I could perceive heat, light, motion all through the scars. I didn't have eyes anymore. Not really. I had become a living sensor array. My entire body converted into an organ of perception. The Departamento Munitorum invalided me out, not because I was useless, but because I was too useful. They were afraid of what I'd become, afraid I'd reach critical mass like Kareem and detonate in some populated area. So they put me on this orbital station in this recovery ward with all the other burnouts who survived their transformation. We're all here, dozens of us, glowing in the darkness like beacons. The medic staff wear dark goggles when they check on us. They're terrified, even though they try to hide it. I met a man here named Corvus, who had been a guard sergeant for 30 years. 30 years of carrying a Lasgun, of firing it in every kind of darkness imaginable. He doesn't look human anymore. His skin is entirely scar tissue, branching patterns that cover every centimeter of his body. His eyes are gone, burned away, and replaced by pure light that shines from the sockets like lumen beams. He can't turn it off. He just shines constantly. A living testament to what the Lasgun does to its users over time. Do you know why they discharge us? He asked me one night. We were sitting in the common area, a dozen burnouts casting enough light to read by. It's not because we're broken, it's because we're finished. We're complete. Complete. The transformation. We've reached the end state. The final form that the weapon was designed to create. We're too valuable to waste in normal combat. Now we're being saved for something else. What? He smiled, and light leaked from between his teeth. They're sending us to the dark places. The places where even Ogryns and Space Marines can't penetrate. The hulks floating in the void. The deep hive tunnels that have been sealed for millennia. The demon-haunted stations at the edge of explored space. Places where the darkness is so absolute that normal humans can't function. But we can. We're living light sources now. We can go into the deepest darkness and still see, still fight. We're being turned into a special forces unit without even knowing it. I didn't believe him at first, but then the orders came through. Not discharge papers, deployment orders. They're sending us to a space hulk that emerged from the warp near the galactic rim. Something's alive inside it. Something that killed every Space Marine team they sent in. The hulk is too massive to destroy, too potentially valuable to ignore, and too dark inside for normal humans to navigate. So they're sending us 24 burnouts with glowing eyes and light-leaking scars. Armed with lasguns, we barely need any more because we ourselves have become the weapons. I understand now why we call it a flashlight. Not because it's weak, not because it's a joke, but because that's literally what it turns us into. Flashlights, torches, living illumination for the Imperium's darkest wars. The weapon isn't separate from us. It's a tool for converting human beings into tactical light sources. For transforming flesh and blood into something that can burn away the darkness wherever it appears. And the burning, that's not metaphorical either. We are burning every day, every hour. The light inside us consumes a little more of what we were. Eventually, we'll reach critical mass like Kareem did, and we'll detonate. But until then, we serve. We go into the dark places with our glowing eyes and our scarred skin, and we illuminate them for the soldiers who come after us. Some of the burnouts in this ward are accepting of their fate. They see it as the Emperor's will, a transformation that makes them more useful to the Imperium. Others rage against it, clawing at their scars, begging the medics to cut the light out of them. But there's no cure. The energy is stored at the cellular level, woven into the very structure of our bodies. You can't remove it without killing us, and even then, the body would probably just release it all at once, like Kareem did. I'm writing this with light leaking from my fingertips, pooling on the data slate and making the characters glow. My handwriting, if you can call it that, leaves luminous traces that persist for several seconds before fading. Everything I touch has a faint glow now. I'm marking the world with my presence, burning my fingerprints into reality. The deployment is in 3 days. They're giving us new lasguns, though I don't know why. We don't need them anymore. We are the weapons now. Point us at the darkness and we'll burn it away. Not with laser fire, but with our own bodies, our own accumulated light. We'll go into that space hulk and illuminate it from within. And when we reach critical mass, when the burning becomes too much, we'll detonate and clear rooms more effectively than any melta charge. This is what the lasgun was designed to do. Not to kill enemies, though it does that adequately, but to convert soldiers over years of service into expendable light sources that can be deployed in situations where normal humans would be helpless. It's efficient. It's economical. It uses the soldiers themselves as the ammunition, burning through their lives and converting them into tactical assets. The Imperium wastes nothing, not even the men who serve it faithfully. I think about Sergeant Vex sometimes. Wonder if he knew when he told us to love our lasguns or die. Did he understand that loving the weapon meant becoming it? That every shot would burn us a little more, transform us a little further until we weren't human anymore, but living flashlights for the Imperium's endless wars. Probably the veterans always know. They just don't tell the new recruits, because what would be the point? Everyone who survives long enough goes through the same transformation. Better to let them discover it gradually, shot by shot, burn by burn, until one day they look in a mirror and see light shining from their eyes. The other burnouts are gathering. I can feel them through the walls. Their light resonates with mine, a sympathetic vibration that tells me they're close. We're forming up, preparing for deployment, moving together like we're already a unit. Maybe we are. Maybe the light connects us somehow, makes us into something more than individual soldiers. A luminous organism, a compound being made of human flesh and stored energy. Trooper Corvus is standing at the viewport, staring out at the void. His light is so bright now, it's painful to be near him. He's close to critical mass, maybe hours away, but he's smiling. Do you feel it? He asks. The purpose. I do feel it. The burning that used to be painful has become something else. Not comfortable, but right. Like this is what I was always meant to become. What every step of my life was leading toward. The Lasgun didn't ruin me. It perfected me. It took an ordinary human and transformed him into something that could serve the Imperium in ways a normal man never could. The medic staff is evacuating the non-burnout patients. They know what's coming. We're too bright now, too unstable. Soon we'll board the transport that will take us to the Hulk. And then we'll go into that absolute darkness and fill it with light. Our light. The light we've been storing for years. Shot by shot, burn by burn. This is why they call it a flashlight. Not because it's weak, because it turns us into light itself. Because the weapon's true purpose was never just to kill the enemy. It was to kindle a fire in the user. A slow-burning transformation that would convert flesh into illumination, humans into tools for burning away the darkness. And we do burn. We burn so bright. I'm writing these final words with fingers that are almost entirely luminous, leaving trails of light across the data slate. My eyes are gone, replaced by pure radiance. My heart is a furnace. Every cell in my body is saturated with stored energy from 23 years of squeezing a trigger. 23 years of watching the flash, 23 years of becoming something other than human. The transport is here. I can hear its engines through the station's hull. Feel the vibration in my burning bones. Time to board. Time to deploy into the darkness and do what we were made for. They'll give us Lasguns when we board. But I'm leaving mine behind. I don't need it anymore. I am the Lasgun now. Point me at the enemy and I'll shine until there's nothing left but light and ash and burn patterns on the walls. This is what you don't understand when you call it a flashlight as a joke. You don't understand that you're exactly right. That's what it is. What it was always designed to be. A tool for converting soldiers into living light sources. A weapon that uses humans as ammunition, burning through them slowly, shot by shot, until they themselves become the weapon. I asked at the beginning if you wanted to know why we call it that. Now, you know. The Lasgun is called a flashlight because that's what it turns us into. And the burning never stops. We carry the Emperor's light into the darkness, written in scars on our flesh, shining from our eyes, leaking from our skin. We are his illumination, his torches, his expendable sources of light cast into the void to burn away the night. And when we can burn no more, when the light inside us reaches critical mass, we will detonate and clear the darkness one final time, bright and brief and utterly expendable. This is the true meaning of the flashlight. This is why it burns. The transport doors are opening. The other burnouts are boarding, glowing like saints, like demons, like dying stars. I'm walking toward them, leaving luminous footprints on the deck, trailing light like blood. In 3 days, we'll enter the Hulk. In 3 days, we'll illuminate the darkness within. And in 3 days, most of us will reach critical mass and burn out in one final flash. Brighter than any Lasgun discharge, bright enough to sear our afterimages into the universe itself. We are the Emperor's flashlights, and we are burning.